Hey gamers, Maniac here with GameAccess.net. Going to be talking about the Wii U today. Now, one of the reasons why, how do I put this? I'm an old school NES gamer. I remember when I was a kid, I had an original NES. I had a lot of the major games for the NES, whether it be Super Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers 3, Tetris, Dr. Mario, all those good games. I had all of them back then. I even had a lot of bad games that everybody remembers, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's neither here nor there. So, when I had never actually gotten any of the subsequent Nintendo consoles for quite a while. I never had a Super Nintendo. I never had a GameCube. I'm sorry, I never had a Nintendo 64. I never had any of those games or those game systems. And I feel like I missed out because there were a lot of great games released on all three of those systems, whether it be games I never played on Super Nintendo, games I never played on the NES, or heck, games I missed out on the original NES. I also never had any of the subsequent Nintendo handhelds. I had an original Game Boy. I only fortunately played 2 games on it. I never had a Game Boy Advance. Heck, I never even had a DS. So there was a lot of Nintendo gaming that I had missed out on both the console as well as the handheld generations, basically. Whether it be through cost or lack of interest at the time. I gotta admit, I missed out on a lot, and that's really disappointing. So when I had found out that the original Wii allowed you to download and purchase games that were from those platforms, that you could play original NES, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo 64 games on the Wii, I had to go out and buy a Wii as soon as one was available. For say nothing of the fact that the Wiis were basically selling like hotcakes. This new system called the Virtual Console was the reason why I had purchased a Wii. I'll be completely honest with you guys about that. By the time the Wii U came out, Nintendo had said that they would continue to support the Virtual Console, as well as when the 3DS came out, there was continuation of the support of the Virtual Console. I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want to talk about how good these guys are doing. The original version of the Virtual Console was only compatible with Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo 64 games. Later on, I think they brought in TurboGrafx 16 games and Genesis games, but that was about it. It was extremely limited because there was only so many controllers that were available for the Wii. You either had to use a GameCube controller if, let's say for example, you were fortunate enough to have a Wii that had a GameCube emulator built into it. You could use a GameCube controller if you had a GameCube controller. Or you would have to pay extra money and basically get a classic controller, something that would plug into your Wiimote. So control options were a bit limited, but the emulation was actually quite good. You would be able to emulate full-on N64 games with the Wii. To say nothing of the fact that you'd be able to play GameCube games, of course, like I said, if your GameCube was if your Wii was compatible with GameCube titles. However, even though the Wii had a huge library of downloadable titles on the Wii, either through WiiWare or for the Virtual Console, the Wii U, which has been out for 2 years now, it's just coming on the 2nd year right now, coming up, has nowhere near the same library that the original Wii had within the same time frame. In fact, Nintendo isn't even really allowing as many platforms to come to the Wii U as they were originally. On the Wii, like I said, you could get Nintendo games, you can get Super Nintendo games, you could get Nintendo 64 games. You could also later on get Genesis and TurboGrafx 16 games, but that came later. But it was still made available. You could probably still get TurboGrafx 16 and Genesis games if you fire up your own Wii's emulator. However, all the Wii U supports are Super Nintendo, original Nintendo, and Game Boy Advance games. Now, we weren't getting handheld titles on the Virtual Console until the Nintendo 3DS came out. After that happened, Nintendo announced that they were going to be releasing Nintendo games, original Nintendo games, as well as Game Boy games. That was the first time we'd ever see Game Boy titles on a virtual console would be for the Nintendo 3DS. And still, the only way you can get Game Boy titles, at least digitally, legally, is on the 3DS's virtual console. They didn't allow original Game Boy titles to be on the Wii U. I don't know why. So there's that platform right there for... oh, and also Game Gear. You can also get Game Gear titles now, but that came in later. When the Wii U's Virtual Console finally launched officially, they were only offering Super Nintendo and original Nintendo games on the Wii U. It wasn't until, I think maybe a little bit early, I think it was April, I don't remember if it was April this year or April last year, when they finally started offering Game Boy Advance games. Even though Game Boy Advance games were announced that they'd be coming to the system, coming to the Wii U before the Wii U even came out. So, that's neither here nor there. I know that a lot of people, and somebody watching this video can certainly be one of them. I know that a lot of people are really mad by this, particularly because they want to play Game Boy Advance games on the 3DS, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I will, I promise. But that's not really what this video is about. I'm going to touch upon that, but that's not really what this video is about. What this video is about, basically, is in my disappointment with Nintendo for how slow they've been to release games on that platform, on the Wii U. There are two reasons. One, the Wii U is not emulating Nintendo 64 games. You cannot get Nintendo 64 games on the Wii U unless you run the Wii's emulator, in which case you need to have a Wiimote and likely also a classic controller for that Wiimote in order to be able to play the Nintendo 64 game. You can't play it on the on the Wii U controller, which is something that I know a lot of people probably would want to do. I'd love to do that. I'd love to play Star Fox 64 on this thing, but I can't. Another problem is that even for the Nintendo and Super Nintendo titles, very few games from the Super Nintendo and Nintendo titles, which are already available on the Wii Virtual Console, are available. None of the original American Final Fantasy versions of the Final Fantasy games came over here to the Wii U, even though they are available on the Wii's Virtual Console. If I want to run like Final Fantasy 1 or Final Fantasy 4 or Final Fantasy 6, I have to emulate them on the Wii. So that's a bit of a problem. It took forever for Super Mario Bros. 3 to come out. That's like my favorite NES game. Probably a lot of people's favorite NES game, but that took quite a while for them to come out. I was grateful that they released Earthbound. Don't get me wrong. I was very grateful that they released Earthbound on the system. But I have a laundry list of titles that either already on the Wii or are not on the Wii already that Nintendo has shown no interest in releasing or has not been releasing. They're releasing as many, I think at most about 3 titles per week. That is not fast enough. They should be releasing about a dozen titles per week. The NES library is enormous. Just the NES library alone is enormous. And there's plenty of system favorites that everybody is still talking about which have not come out. So, let me just talk about this right now. If Nintendo, this is in last place. You could probably argue that maybe the Xbox One is probably in last place, but a lot of people are considering this currently in last place. I think this is a great system. I really do like the Wii U a lot. I bought it a Wii U day one. I've got more Wii U games for my system than I do for my other platforms, although that's because the Wii U's been out longer. I'm really looking forward to the Christmas release schedule for the Wii U, but Nintendo has faltered on the Wii U Virtual Console, and that's the point I wanted to make on this video. One reason is that they have not released more games. They should be releasing more titles on a more regular basis for the Wii U. The second reason is that they're limiting themselves by only allowing 3 different platforms. They should be allowing more platforms. They should at least have Nintendo 64 titles on the Wii U. Although I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. The second thing is that some people are arguing that maybe they should be arguing the same thing for the 3DS. The 3DS is not getting as many virtual console titles either. I would say that the Wii U, that the 3DS has probably got more virtual console titles and probably more of the favorites than I was expecting it would get at this point in its life cycle. I'm really actually happy with what's already been made available for the 3DS, and I'll tell you why. Immediately they made like Metroid 2 available on the Game Boy emulator, as well as Link's Awakening is available. Oracle of Seasons, Oracle of Ages is available on the Virtual Console. I know those were like original Super Mario Brothers is available. So immediately they did get a lot of the titles that absolutely had to be released. Super Mario Land, those are all available already. So there's that. What everybody's upset about is that they haven't released Game Boy Advance games on this. Even though Game Boy Advance titles were made available to ambassadors who were early adopters of the 3DS. They were basically, for being an early adopter of the 3DS and paying full price for it, Nintendo offered these loyal customers 3DS exclusive downloads of Game Boy Advance titles. And some good Game Boy Advance titles, and I think the Game Boy Advance version of Mario Kart was released as along with this ambassador program. The Minish Cap was really, those are just two titles I can think of off the top of my head, which I have not seen on the 3DS. I purchased the 3DS when the XL came out, basically, so I missed out on those titles. But from what I've seen, even though those games were made available to ambassadors, there were a couple of problems with them, which is probably why Nintendo hasn't re-released them to people who want to purchase them. And they did seem to be hardware-specific problems. In particular, from what I've seen from them, how do I explain this? The 3DS, for those of you who don't know, who don't have a 3DS, anybody who does have a 3DS, you can just fast forward the video a little bit, but the 3DS basically does a lot of stuff while it's turned on and in sleep mode. It's not a system that basically when you close it, it completely goes into a low-power standby, basically. This thing actually does active things in the background, even while it's asleep. If you want to turn those off, you can either just turn off the system or disable the Wi-Fi. In particular, it has a step counter that's on while it's asleep. And it has the Street Pass feature, which allows me exchanging between 3DS owners. If two 3DS owners come into contact with each other while both their 3DSs are active or in sleep mode, as long as both the Wi-Fi is active, they can exchange their Miis and use their Miis in 3DS specific titles. I have a whole Mind of Maniac about that if you're interested in seeing that. So if you're interested in learning more about Street Pass, my recommendation would be to go check that one out. But there are limitations to the Street Pass feature. One is that it's only compatible with 3DS titles, as well as specific virtual console titles at that. If I was to, even though this thing has a DS emulator in it, which will allow me to play DS games natively, okay, that sounds not natively, but at a native aspect ratio, in a native resolution, in a native, dimension, it only plays them in 2D. So natively, I mean, like as native as you can get on this hardware. It can't do Street Pass during DS mode, nor can it do, use a step counter or anything like that. It can't do any of that. Nor can it do any of that while it's using DSiWare software. If I was to be running even a downloadable DS title, I can't use any of the 3DS's specific features while I'm using that title. It's just not possible. I can't even run them in standby or hold my progress and do something else. The 3DS just is not compatible with that sort of thing. I could put a game into standby, but that's it. I can't run the 3DS menu in the background as the game is paused. I just can't do it. It's not allowed. I don't know if that's a hardware specific thing. I don't know if it's a software specific thing, but it is an issue. The Game Boy Advance titles, from what I've seen, have that problem as well. They aren't compatible. Maybe this is a hardware problem. Maybe this is a software problem. Maybe this is a limitation. I don't know. But as far as I can tell, the emulator can't run stuff in the background while the while the 3DS is playing a GBA title. Even for the ambassadors, it just can't do that. However, that's not true for the Game Boy Advance or the NES titles, or native 3DS exclusive downloadable titles. If you are running a 3DS title, or a GBA, or a Game Boy Color, or NES title on the Virtual Console for the 3DS, it runs just fine, and you can do stuff in the background. Now, if you ask me, that's not exactly a fair trade-off. I'd be willing to trade that off. I'd be willing to trade off disabling the, I do it when I play a DS title. I'm willing to trade off those 3DS specific features to be able to play 3DS exclusive GBA exclusive titles on the go. I'm willing to do that. But my guess is that Nintendo might assume, yeah, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of players out there that aren't going to be willing to do that. And since the Wii U can do them without much of an issue, we'll offer the Wii U, we'll offer the GBA stuff on the Wii U, and we'll offer like original Game Boy Color, and just NES titles on the 3DS. So maybe my guess is they don't want market overlap. That could be one issue. Maybe they don't want people to have to compete between, oh, I want to buy this and I want to buy, or I want to buy this, and basically that. But that having been said, there are plenty of NES titles that are on the 3DS Virtual Console that are also available on both the Wii and the Wii U Virtual Console. Punch-Out, like the original Punch-Out, the original Super Mario Brothers. I think the Lost Levels is now on the Wii U, which means that it's now on multiple platforms. Because I know Lost Levels is on, or the original version of Lost Levels, is on the 3DS Virtual Console. So, I don't know, maybe that argument kind of falls apart at that point, which is fine, it can fall apart. But I think probably the biggest reason why Nintendo has not allowed for Game Boy Advance titles to be on the 3DS is probably because it can't run 3DS exclusive features in the background, and it doesn't want to burden their users with that issue, especially given the fact that the Wii U can run them no problem. I have played my Game Boy Advance titles on this. It's great. I have been playing WarioWare on this thing nonstop since I purchased it. I love playing Game Boy Advance titles on this thing. I don't know if it's just the control scheme, or sometimes I don't even bother turning the TV on. I'll just like mess around with this thing basically while it's running. I might be watching TV or doing something else basically, but I think that's what Nintendo really wanted. I think they wanted something that they could present specifically on this screen that could be manipulated on this screen basically. I don't know. I kind of want to wrap this video up with what I think Nintendo should do in order to improve their Virtual Console. That's, I think, what the purpose of this video is. First thing I'm doing, I devoted pretty much the first 18 minutes of this video basically talking about all the problems that I've been having and possible solutions, but now I don't want to talk about solutions. First off, Nintendo should be having a more regular basis of release schedule. They should be releasing more titles on the Virtual Console for both the 3DS and for the Wii U. Right now, I think they're only releasing about 2 or 3 per week. They should be releasing at least a half a dozen. There's more than enough Game Boy titles. There's more than enough Nintendo titles. The Game Boy Advance alone, like I said, I never had a game. It has tons of great titles for the system. And even though Nintendo has released a lot of them, particularly I was really happy when they released the Minish Cap, as well as Metroid Fusion and the first Mario and Luigi title. Those, which were, obviously, everyone's really looking forward to that. WarioWare title, that was great that they released that, as well as, but there's a lot more. I think a lot of people want Final Fantasy Tactics Game Boy Advance on the Wii U emulator. I don't know if that's going to be happening, especially given the fact that we don't even have Final Fantasy 1, 4, and 6 on the Wii U Virtual Console yet. So that might be a bit of an issue. Other stuff that I'd really like to see on the Wii U Virtual Console, they have not released a single Pokemon game. That's the big issue. If you want to sell Nintendo consoles, what it takes is Pokemon. I know, okay, I'm going to say this right now. I'm a 30-year-old man, okay? I know what sells. And for some odd reason, those damn Pocket Monsters sell. And a lot of people have been talking, even myself, about wanting to see those original Pokemon titles on the Virtual Console come back. there's no reason why, at least from a technical perspective, why they can't be re-released. The Wii U's got a Game Boy Advance emulator. They can port the Game Boy Advance titles. The 3DS has a Game Boy and Game Boy Color emulator. They can port over the original first 2 generation titles to the 3DS for all I care. But they should be releasing those titles on the Virtual Console. If it's an issue with, they can't get trading working, I don't know. Then I would be fine with at least going without trading for a short while. I just want to play them, even if I have to play them by myself. I still just want to play them. So, I really would like to see these titles come to the system. I honestly think people would be more than willing to buy Wii U's. Nintendo bet that they could sell, that Earthbound alone could sell Wii U's. They weren't disappointed by those results. I think that probably releasing like Pokemon Emerald or Pokemon Fire Red or something like that to the Wii U, at least in the short term, could boost Wii U sales as well as sales on the Nintendo eShop. Second thing is, there should be a GameCube emulator. Now, I'm not saying do like what they did for the Game Boy Advance. Nintendo is very close to releasing a peripheral for the Wii U that will allow GameCube controllers to work. They say right now that it's only going to be compatible with the game Super Smash Brothers. Okay. But that's not to say that it couldn't work in other titles. Or it's not to say that it couldn't work in something that they may have planned for the future. I really would like to see a GameCube Virtual Console. The reason why is because there are a lot of GameCube games that basically should be, people missed out on. The GameCube was the third lowest system seller of that generation. I think it only sold maybe about 10 million units or so. It never sold 20 million units. Maybe it's between 10 and 14 million if I can remember last time I checked. That having been said, there are a lot of great titles. The Wind Waker was one of them. That fortunately got re-released. The original Pikmin, that got a re-release as well, but only on the Wii. If you wanted to play the original Pikmin, you would have to use the Wii emulator. But then again, there are other GameCube titles that most of the time Nintendo has just forgotten. They never re-released Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem. Everybody's been talking about that title for years, wanting to see either a sequel or a remake. I'd love to see just a port to the Game Boy, to the Wii U. I really would. I'd love to see that. It'd be fantastic. It'd be great to play Game Boy titles on. GameCube titles on this thing. It'd be great. I'd love to play like the Twin Snakes on this thing. I'd love to be able to. It'd be great. It just seems like a logical thing. There were even Pokemon titles released for the GameCube. Great Pokemon titles that everybody's talking about right now that have are very rare or tough to find, like Pokemon Coliseum or Pokemon XD. None of those titles have been re-released. I'd love to see a value pack. Heck, you could do what you did with Wind Waker and just re-release them, but I'd love to see Pokemon XD and Pokemon Coliseum come to the new titles. I'd love to see some of the GameCube games that made use of GBA interconnectivity being ported over, like The Legend of Zelda Four Swords Adventures for the GameCube that allowed GameCube to Game Boy Advance connectivity. I'd love to see them be able to bring that over for the Wii U, so you could use the Wii U as you would a Game Boy Advance or something like that. The GameCube could do that, or Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, where you could plug like 4 Game Boy Advances into the GameCube and be able to monitor your game that way. I'd love to see that. Or, we know that, heck, maybe if they realize that this won't work that well, they could have people plug in with their 3DSs wirelessly. Monster Hunter 3 proved that wireless connectivity between the Wii U and the 3DS is possible. You can change Mii's and stuff like that way as well. Maybe it would be better if, these games could run on this stuff. I'd be fine with just running an app or something like that on this to get the full experience basically. I'd love to have that. That'd be great. You can call, everybody's doing second screen nowadays. Let's see. We'll see. So there's that. My recommendations to Nintendo: release more titles to the Virtual Console. 2. Offer more platforms on the Virtual Console. 3. Pokemon. Release the original Pokemon titles. Or re-release the original Pokemon titles, I should say. 4. Bring in GameCube connectivity. Or GameCube compatibility. With the multi-tap, it could be possible. They might be able to reconfigure the multi-tap for the GameCube into a way that you could get, like, you know, that would be a way that might be compatible with the GameCube emulator, but we don't know. I'm not holding my breath, but I think that probably if this Christmas doesn't do too well for Nintendo, they might start experimenting with more things. As for stuff that I'm really looking forward to from Nintendo, at least from that stuff that's in the pipeline, I would say I'm really looking forward to the Pokemon 3rd Generation remakes, as well as the new Captain Toad game looks pretty good. And of course, Super Smash Bros. And Bayonetta 2. Everybody's looking forward to those titles, so I guess I'll join the club on those. So, thank you for watching this video. If you have your own comments that you'd like to make about the Nintendo Virtual Console, feel free to just post a comment below. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you guys for watching. Please visit my website, GameAccess.net. This is Maniac, over and out.